Part 343. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 3431. The three of them sat on the small stools and did their own things. Yin was reading a book, while Bai Shan took a stick and drew a picture of the geography he had traveled during this period of time. He decided to add it to the map when he returned. Zhou Man is holding a small notebook to record the new medicinal materials and plants discovered recently. Some of them are familiar to her, but they have never been recorded before. She can directly record their medicinal properties, growth environment, and processing methods. Wait. Some were plants that she had never seen or heard of. The encyclopedia published entries one after another. She copied the entries and did corresponding research. Although she has resigned, she still occasionally sends some manuscripts to the Chongquen Museum, where she will jointly publish some textbooks or supplementary books with the Imperial Medical Office. And Zhou Man has been summarizing the animals and plants she has seen, and her masterpiece is still waiting for her to complete. When Bai Erlang and Mingde walked over holding hands, what they saw was that the three of them were doing their own thing without interfering with each other. He glanced over the stalls one by one and saw the pancakes in front of Yin Or, with a toothache on his face, who sells pancakes like this, at least you set up an oven to heat them up for people to eat. The three of them looked up in shock when they heard his voice, you. Seeing Mingde following him, he was even more shocked. When did you guys arrive? Bai Erlang said complacently, I arrived last night, but the place you said was hard to find. We were about to go out to find someone to inquire about it. The servants said they saw you in the market in the town, so we came over. The three of them hurriedly got up. Zhou Man looked them up and down, and said, it's amazing that you can really come out. The children in the house stopped making noise. Bai Erlang stopped talking. Mingde laughed and said, I begged Brother Huang to change his identity and send him to the army for training. Zhou Man was curious, which army? Angzi army. Zhou Man stared slightly, so far? Are you willing? The smile on Mingde's face was faint. This kid is too naughty. Now he is in Xianing all over the world, and only the Angzi area can temper his temper. Bai Shan frowned and said, it is a good thing that Xianing is everywhere, but if the army slackens in training, disasters will not be far away. Bai Erlang was afraid when he heard him say this now. You won't be unable to figure out what to do, right? It's so easy to resign. Bai Shandao, you think too much. Even if I want to go back, His Majesty will not be happy with me going back, but it's okay to write and chat with your Majesty in your free time. After the Emperor ascended the throne, although there were occasional wars in the surrounding area, that was before. In the past few years, because the development of the Jin dynasty has become better and better, water transport has been opened, commerce is prosperous, and grain production is high. Live and work in peace and contentment. Even the northern and southern tribes that had been in turmoil gradually settled down. One is that Dajin exported planting technology to them, and they also relied on Dajin's grain, tea, and salt. The second is that the Great Jin has been strong in recent years, and its power has shaken the quartet. If the cost of war is too high, and what can be obtained in other ways, then there is no need for war. Of course, there are always people who are not reconciled, but those are all skirmishes. But if the army has reached the point where Princess Mingde thinks that only the Angzi army can train children and grandchildren, it means that the armies have begun to relax, which is not a good thing. Zhou Man said, what are you afraid of? There is Tubo in the west, the Huns in the north, and a large sea in the east. Don't worry, your Majesty is not indulging in pleasure now. The most important thing is that their emperor's hobby is hunting on horseback. Oh, there is one more delicious food, but he doesn't pursue refinement, so it doesn't show. Even if it is to please the emperor, the military will not be too barren in martial arts. Zhou Man, did you send the child there because Guo Zhao was in the Angzi army? Bai Erlang's eyes wandered. Mingda glanced at him. It was only when I sent the child out that I realized that you have an old relationship with this General Guo. Zhou Man just laughed. It's not just an old relationship, we have often exchanged letters over the years, and the pharmacy of our Imperial Medical Office supplies them with a lot of proprietary medicines every year, because there are many foreigners there, and they might bring them with them when they go to and from each other because of the plague. Our Imperial Medical Office specially set up a medical office there, where the smallpox vaccination rate is still higher than that in the capital, and children will be vaccinated as long as they are 5 years old. Guo Zhao was dragged down by his father in the past, but after many years of experience in the army, he finally returned to Angzi and guarded the western gate for the Jin dynasty. It has been 10 years and has not been transferred. The Angzi army recognized him, and if there were no accidents, he would spend his whole life in the Angzi army. Yin Yu said, Guo Zhao is a clean and upright person, and there is nothing wrong with sending the child to him. Mingda, I'm afraid he will be too lenient with the child. After all, he is the son of an old friend. Bai Shan glanced at Bai Erlang, and said to Princess Mingda, then let's write him a letter, telling him not to be too merciful. Bai Erlang's face turned red, and he whispered, Erlang didn't do anything bad, isn't he just being naughty? Everyone looked at him silently. Bai Erlang raised his hand and said, okay, I'll listen to you. The four are satisfied. At this time, Bai Ziajun, who had just arrived in Angzi not long ago, wrote a letter to his father with tears on his face, hoping that his father could save him. He vowed to study hard, never play truant again, and never play mischievous things again. Wu, he is still young, why did he come to suffer such hardships? He doesn't expect to be famous, to be appointed as a marquis, he has a family business, he also has a title, and he doesn't break the law. He just likes to play polo and read scriptures. Why does he want to come to the army to practice? An official has his brother. Even if the family property is divided into 30%, it is enough for him to lie down for a lifetime. Bai Ziajun, who didn't want to work hard at all, wrote the letter and hurriedly sent it to the post station. But Angzi was too far away from the capital, and there was no one to deliver the letter, and it would take at least a month to deliver it through the post station. But at this time he didn't know that his father was no longer in the capital. After confirming that he had arrived in Angzi, his mother encouraged his father to pack his luggage and go south to find his cousins and aunts. The letter was sent to the capital, and finally passed around and passed to the emperor. The housekeeper of the princess mansion wanted to send someone to Lingnan. According to the master's habit, he first asked a few acquaintances in the capital to see if he had anything to bring to the south, and if so, he would send it along. As a result, the word spread to the emperor's ears. The emperor happened to want to reply to Bai Shan's letter. It was just a letter, it would be too expensive to send someone to send it, and it would be bad not to send it. He happened to hear that the princess mansion was going to send something to the south, so he asked a lot. Then I got a letter from my nephew. Like the first emperor, the emperor didn't have any psychological burden at all, and directly opened the letter from the person. The letter was specially written to Bai Erlang, and when Bai Ziajun wrote it, he specifically told him to let his father read it by himself, and not let his mother see it. The emperor glanced at the 10 lines, curled his lips in disgust. The two children, the older one has a brain as white as the second, but his temperament seems to be sensible, the younger one has a brain as sensible as his father, but his temper is just like his father's, and he has no ambitions. Eunuch Wu served tea and said with a smile, my son-in-law is also very smart. These years, my son-in-law's books have been bestsellers. I heard that some people have sold them to foreign countries, and they are also famous all over the world. I was writing, I accidentally fell on Bai Erlang's head. See you tomorrow. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 3432. The emperor snorted, folded the letter and stuffed it back into the envelope. Eunuch Wu smiled. Don't look at the emperor's dislike of the white son-in-law. Among so many princess son-in-laws, he is most satisfied with the white son-in-law. Even the fresh son-in-law I personally selected for my daughter is not as good as the son-in-law. Among the many consorts, those who can be consistent with the princess are either limited in talent and cowardly in character, not as humble as the white consort, or they are ambitious in official career and need to maintain the relationship with the royal family. And most concubines, even if they don't have concubines, there will be no fewer people in the house, and of course, they will also seek official careers. For someone like Bai Cheng, who was born as a Jinchi, who is also noble and proud and doesn't care about his official career, and only cares about the princess, he is the only one among so many concubines. Moreover, the white son-in-law and the princess are really singing in harmony. Although the emperor always dislikes the white son-in-law for his lack of ambition, he is very happy that he can sing with his husband. After stuffing the letter in, the emperor said, "Let the princess mansion send the received things to the palace, let the guards deliver the things, and hand this letter to the princess." Obviously, it is to cut off the way for Bai Ziajun to ask for help. Of course, this is a later story. At this time, Bai Erlang and Mingda just arrived at the place to meet Zhou Man and the others. Zhou Man closed the stall directly, and the steamed stuffed bun stall diagonally across from them couldn't help asking, "Closed the stall so early?" Zhou Man smiled and narrowed his eyes, "I'm happy to have a friend here, and I won't sell it anymore." The people at the booth next to it thought, "That must be sold too. These three people have come to set up stalls in the last few markets, but no one bought their things." Anyway, Zhou Man and the others were happy, and a group of people happily closed the stall and went home. Bai Erlang and Mingda only took one of the palace maids with them, and let the others stay behind to carry things up for them. When they finally climbed up the mountain out of breath, Bai Erlang couldn't understand what he said. Why are you so hesitant to choose to build a house at such a high place?" Bai Shan looked at him with distaste. "It's because you neglected to exercise. Look at Yin He, although he's short of breath, he's not like you." However, Bai Shan and Zhou Man, who had been going up and down the mountain to drill in the woods a lot recently, were only slightly anxious, and they didn't seem to have changed much. Bai Erlang turned his head to look at Yin He. Yin Ju met his gaze, smiled slightly and said, "The mountain is not high, it is true that you have neglected to exercise. There are many mountains here, but they are not very high, and the tops of the mountains are stacked on top of each other, slanting upwards, so as long as you control your speed, climbing the mountain is not tiring." Zhou Man motioned him to look back, "That's why we're here." Bai Erlang turned his head and saw the clouds and mist floating among the mountains behind him. Today's sunshine is not very good, so the clouds and mist do not disperse, but when it shines on the mountains, the tops of the trees under the clouds and mist glow with light golden light. He was stunned for a moment. Bai Shan was a little complacent. "How about it, doesn't it look good?" He said, "We chose this position for a day and compared it back and forth between these two mountains before we chose it. As for the scenery, they heard people talking about it when they first arrived, and they came here specially to visit. These two mountains are famous for the countless wild pomegranates in the mountains. Every March and April, these two mountains in the middle of the mountain, there are pomegranate flowers of various colors, which are extremely gorgeous. It's only when I came here that I realized that not only the pomegranate flowers below the mountainside are beautiful, but the clouds and mists are also good." Bai Shan said, "The climate here is humid, so unless the sun is shining, the clouds and mists will not disperse. Regardless of whether they disperse or not, don't let go, they all look good. Mingda, you guys will find a place. It's really nice here." When they turned around a bend and saw the house built under the top of the mountain and a large platform extending from the front of the house, both Mingda and Bai Erlang were so convinced that they couldn't speak. Zhou Man said, "I don't know that you are coming, but there are still houses." The servants squeezed together to squeeze out a room. When they built it, they opened it up, so whether it is the 3 rooms of the main room or the left and right wing rooms, they are all very large. Joe Man asked Zibing to pack up their things, and they would move in when the room became available, leaving the main room to Mingda and Bai Er. Mingda hurriedly said, "No, it's too troublesome to move like this, just pack it up and let us live in the wing." Joe Man was about to refute, but Bai Er didn't care and said, "You are the host, we count as guests, how can guests live in the main room, so let's do it, anyway, I don't have to live in the side room." Bai Shan smiled and said, "Look at what else is missing, let them go down to buy it while it's still early in the day, otherwise we will have to make do with it tonight." Just let it go, Bai Erlang didn't care. He was particularly interested in the karst cave they mentioned in the letter, and asked excitedly, "Where is the karst cave? Is there any water shortage at home? Otherwise, I'll fetch water." So Bai Erlang and Bai Shan went out with wooden barrels, and Joe Man and Ming Dayan probably followed behind. "Go down a little, just turn a corner." After entering the cave, Mingda couldn't help saying, "It's very good to come here in summer to escape the heat." Bai Erlang was already carrying the wooden barrel and went towards the ticking pool excitedly. He saw that there were stones at the bottom of the pool, stones all around, and stones on his head. Bai Erlang looked surprised. "You can store so much water just by the dripping of the dripping water, so you can't run out after using it for so long." "Look," Bai Shan pointed to the cracks in the rocks on the edge of the pool, which extend down into the pool. "There is water seeping out of the cracks in the rocks. At first we thought the water in the pool did not overflow because it leaked through the crevices of the rocks. Later, when more water was fetched, the water in the pool went down a bit, and we found out that the crevices of the rocks were leaking water, but we don't know where it came from. We can't find it right now. This pool is not big, but it's not small, and it's also deep." Bai Shan once walked through it barefoot out of curiosity, but he only took 3 steps. Finally, he used a wooden stick to probe and found that the pool was as deep as a person. So Bai Shan threatened Bai Erlang, "You better be careful when fetching water, if you fall, you will die." Bai Erlang snorted unconvinced, "It's not that I can't swim." Bai Shan motioned him to touch the water. Bai Erlang touched it with his hand, and happily drew up the water. "It's cool and cool, this water is really good, what Mingda said is right, it must be great to escape the heat in summer." Bai Shan and Joe Man looked at him with caring eyes. "Such cold water, are you sure you can get up after falling into it? And the stone wall is smooth, so it's not easy to get up." Yin coughed lightly. "Standing on the edge to fetch water may not necessarily cause him to fall, so don't scare him." Mingda pursed his lips and smiled, and urged, "Hurry up and fetch water. Next, I will write about their experience of traveling around the world, because they are not alone, so it is difficult to determine who is the fan, so let's start with the name of the fan." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 3433. Bai Shan and Bai Erlang fetched a bucket of water. Joe Man picked up the other side of the barrel, and carried it out together with Bai Shan. "Let's go, I'm just hungry, go back and make some delicious cakes." Bai Erlang and Yin Or carried another bucket. Mingda was very curious about it, so he strongly demanded to carry it for a while, and a lot of water spilled out. When they got back to the house, there was only half of Bai Erlang's bucket of water left. Joe Man was very convinced. "How did you do it? At least 2/3 of it is left." Mingda smiled embarrassedly, while Bai Erlang asked, "Why don't you carry it? It's easy to spill if you carry it." Bai Shan, "Because you want to carry it." Shirajiro. Yin Or twisted the sleeves that were soaked in water, and said indifferently, "Go and change, a friend is coming from afar, happy today, have a drink at noon. Joe Man cheered up, thinking of the plum blossom wine he couldn't drink no matter what. He nodded immediately, yes, let's drink today. It's a pity that the wine could not be finished in the end. Mingda and Bai Erlang were only willing to drink one glass, and refused to pour any more. Joe Man could only put away the rest of the wine regretfully. Seeing her disappointment, Bai Shan said, why don't you bring the wine with you when you go to the market next time? Maybe it can be sold. Joe Man lifted his spirits, that's a good idea. Bai Erlang asked, is the market here complete? Joe Man, it's average. It's more complete than Dali village. After all, it's a town, but it's not too complete. Bai Erlang was curious, how much money did you make? Joe Man, Bai Shan, and Yin Or were silent. Bai Erlang looked at this, then at that, and if he felt something, you don't make any money, right? Yin He, I have never set up a stall in this kind of market, so I am curious to give it a try, and it is important to participate. Bai Erlang asked Bai Shan and Joe Man, what about you? They have had a lot of experience. Bai Shandao, life is long, why be so anxious? Just let nature take its course and be happy in your heart. Bai Erlang curled his lips in disgust, to put it bluntly, I can't sell it. Is your price too expensive? Joe Man said, my medicinal materials are already very cheap, and they are all processed. They are much cheaper than those sold in pharmacies. It's a pity that they don't know medicine, so they can't sell them. Who is free to buy medicine on the street? Bai Erlang asked curiously, why can't game be sold? Bai Shan spread his hands, maybe it's because I'm caught between the two of them. If their things can't be sold, mine can't be sold either. Then you are still among them. What's the matter? Bai Shan said indifferently, anyway, we have a lot of people, and we don't have much game, so we can always finish it. To put it bluntly, they are just looking for a reason to go to the market to squat and set up a stall, and they are not really trying to make money. Mingda liked their state very much, and was eager to try, I will also go to the next rally. Joe Man responded in one gulp. As a result, the villagers in the village found that there were two more idiots setting up stalls. Although the seats they occupy are not very good, but the booth with 5 small stools sitting in a row, occupying a lot of seats at once, is very attractive. After doing this twice, someone finally couldn't help but came up to talk to them, Master, lady, you won't be able to sell anything if you set up a stall like this, you have to shout. Mingda and Bai Erlang raised their heads and looked at the old man in front of them with confused faces, unable to understand what he said. Bai Shan smiled slightly, and replied in a slightly awkward dialect, it's okay, guests in need will come to the door, and we may not understand everyone when we yell. Only then did Bai Erlang realize later, they don't know how to speak official language. Mingda, no wonder you don't shout. Joe Man shook his head, that's not true. We've been here for so long. Although there are still many things we can't say, we still know the dialect of yelling. We don't yell, mainly because we don't want to speak. However, it was rare for someone to come up to talk to them, so Joe Man simply grabbed the old man and said, old man, every time I go to the market, I see you eating at the bun shop opposite. Does this mean that the family doesn't make lunch? The old man barely understood her deformed dialect, pointed to the bun shop and replied, my daughter's home. Joe Man clasped his hands together and said with a smile, so it's the father-in-law of the steamed stuffed bun shop. Your son-in-law's craftsmanship is pretty good. Every time I come down the mountain, I have to buy his stuffed buns. The two of them chatted in dialect, so the old man knew that Joe Man and the others were tourists from the capital, and they just thought the scenery here was beautiful, so they stayed here for a while. Joe Man knew that he had 6 daughters, but no son was born. His daughters were all married nearby, so he went to eat at a daughter's house every month. The craftsmanship is the best, and it will not shorten his food and drink. Yin Or sat on the sidelines and stared blankly. Although he was already familiar with Zhou Man's amiability, he was still dumbfounded to see her get along with others so easily. Bai Shan also withdrew his slightly surprised gaze, took a biscuit from Yin He's stall, tore it open, and gave half to Zhou Man and the old man. So the two chatted more lively with the cake that was divided in half. In the end, Zhou Man took the opportunity to recommend his medicinal materials. These medicinal materials are all from the mountains. Now the weather is getting colder. I have seen that the temperature will drop soon. Do you want to buy some medicine to go back to protect against the cold? This is Radix astragali, this is Atractylodes rhizoma Atractylodes rhizoma Atractylodes rhizome, and this is Fang Feng. They have all been concocted. Take them back and boil water to drink, which can prevent epidemics. Winter is coming, and when the weather is cold, more people sneeze and cough. For prevention, it is also very effective in the early stage of illness. Zhou Man dug a lot of medicinal materials from the mountains, but most of the medicinal materials placed on the stalls can be made into prescriptions, so when people who buy medicines come, she can help to make a prescription. Otherwise, except for the people in the pharmacy, no one will buy a single medicine alone. No? It's a pity. The old man is determined not to be fooled. What is not good to buy, how can he buy medicine? But they chatted for so long, they already had some friendship, and they ate half a cake. It seemed that it was not good to buy nothing, so he looked around, and finally pointed to the wild rabbit and Yin Or in front of Bai Erlang. Pancake in front of him said, "Otherwise, I'll buy these too." Bai Erlang cheered up, looked at Bai Shan and burst out laughing, took the wild rabbit and stuffed it into the old man's hand. "It's cheap for you, just 20 coins. Such a fat wild rabbit, with its fur, is indeed cheap." The old man smiled happily. This morning, in order to keep the booth in front of Bai Erlang and Mingdan not empty, he specially distributed a wild rabbit to Bai Shan. Yin Or's expression was also a little blank. It's been almost a month since he set up a stall here, and he hasn't opened it even once. So, inexplicably, he opened it? See you tomorrow. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 3434. Yinju hesitated for a while holding the cake, and finally said, 5 wen. The old man's eyes widened. Bai Shan hurriedly stretched out his hand to hold Yin He down and said, 1 penny is enough. He said that 5 pennies can make a round. Only then did the old man calm down, and glanced at the cloth bag in front of him. There were not many cakes in it, but there were 7 or 8, so he generously took out 5 cents and said, "I bought them all." Yin Or silently collected the money, and waited for him to leave with the wild rabbit and the cake before asking, "The cake is so cheap? It also costs 2 cents a piece, right? I use vegetable oil for this cake, and there is a lot of meat in it. Because of the high humidity here, I even had someone crush the peppercorns and add it in to keep the cold out." He said, "I've done the calculations, 5 cents is not expensive. Xanthoxylum bungianum is not cheap, meat is not cheap, even vegetable oil is a bit expensive in this place." Bai Shan, "I know, but I'm afraid he will beat you. There may be people in this small town who are willing to pay 5 cents for a cake, but it's definitely not this old man. Anyway, the cake is sold, so you can tell me if you're happy or not." Yin Or nodded after thinking about it. "It feels pretty good." So Yinju took the initiative and said, "Let's go. In order to celebrate that I finally sold the things today, I invite you to a restaurant for dinner. There are only 2 restaurants in the town, and they are still opposite each other." Yin Or didn't have a choice, so he took them directly and walked towards one of them. When they first arrived here, they ate at both restaurants. Even after such a long time, they patronized all the food sold in the market. After passing, you will naturally know whose taste is like. The restaurant has only one lobby, and there are only 5 tables in the lobby, and the gap between the tables is very small. A group of people looked at it, and then arrogantly sat down on a table facing the door, so that they could see the street when they turned their heads. It was already early winter, and there was nothing busy here after paying the autumn tax, so there were quite a few people taking to the streets. Joe Man and the others unceremoniously ordered the best dishes in the store. Well, there are only a few dishes in the store. This is a small town. If it weren't for the 2 relatively famous mountains beside it, even these 2 small restaurants wouldn't be able to open. Joe Man gave Mingda a bowl of white rice from the shop, and said, "The rice here is delicious, it is thinner than the one in Guangzhou, and it is also soft and fragrant. It tastes good to me, you can try it." Because there are only guests at their table, the restaurant serves the food fairly quickly, and they are all simple steamed, fried and boiled. Mingda took a bite. This skill is very ordinary, but the rice is indeed delicious. Can't this rice be planted in Guangzhou? Joe Man said, "I'm afraid it's because of the regional climate. There are also new types of rice planted here, but I learned a little bit, and the locals didn't give up the rice they kept. The taste is a bit different." She said, "We can ask Sinong Temple to send people to study and increase the yield of these rice seeds with different tastes." By Shandao, this is not something that can be achieved in the short term, I can only make a suggestion with Sinong Temple. Mingda, do you want me to speak? Now the clan is in charge of Sinong Temple, Mingda's cousin. Joe Man spread his hands. "My eldest nephew failed to pass the proposal twice, maybe you can make a suggestion, whether it will work or not depends on their own plans, maybe because the cost is too high, they don't want to forget it." Mingda thought for a while and then nodded, "I see." She turned her head to look outside the door and asked, "Winter is here, shall we spend the winter here this year?" "No," Joe Man said, "although it's not as cold as in Chang'an, and it doesn't even snow, it will still be very cold after a light snowfall. You and Yin are in poor health, so it's not suitable to spend the winter on the mountain." "That." Joe Man giggled and said, "Let's go to Xiangzhou, where there is Tangquan. Let's live there for a winter. I heard that the scenery there is also very good." "Mingda, is it far?" "It's not very far. It should take 2 days by car. This is because there are many mountains here, and a detour is required, otherwise it will be faster." Joe Man and the others had a good plan. When the weather gets colder, they will go to Xiangzhou and leave quietly. When they came, they pretended to be tourists and did not identify themselves. And this area is full of Yi people, they take care of themselves, although there are village chiefs, most of them are the chiefs of local big clans. Seeing that Bai Shan and the others really looked like tourists, they traveled around the mountains and rivers to eat and drink every day, so they didn't care too much. But one morning, officers and soldiers and people from Liu's governor's mansion entered the town, found the head of the village, and asked directly, "Mr. Shang He, where are they?" Li Chang looked confused. "Who?" The officers and soldiers paused for a moment and then said, "Ex-Prince Baigong, don't you know? He stayed here, in a place where Long Dushan is." The village chief pointed in one direction blankly and said, "Changdu Mountain is there, no, where does anyone live on it? There is a village under the mountain, but it's not close." It was the chief's son who came to his senses and reminded him quietly. He just remembered, "Oh, someone told me a few months ago that they would build a place for hunters to settle on Changdu Mountain." It was a group of tourists who only stayed for a while. When the weather warmed up, "Let's go," it's agreed, "that house is to be left to our people." When the officers and soldiers heard it, they felt that it was the former Prime Minister Bai Shan, and only those with money and leisure had such interest, so they hurriedly said, "Take us there quickly, His Majesty has an order to give them something." The head of the village took them to Changdu Mountain with a dazed expression on his face, and when he led them up the mountain out of breath and lamented in his heart that they were all weird people who liked to live in the mountains, He saw that there were already people waiting at the turning entrance. The other party greeted them, and after saluting, they looked at the officers and soldiers. Who are you and why are you here? One of the leaders took out an official document and said, Dianzhong Province, His Majesty sent me to deliver letters and things to the princess, and also sent some melons and fruits that Lingnan wants to pay tribute to. The head of the village widened his eyes again. Isn't he the county magistrate? How did she become a princess again? The man took the official document and glanced at it, then went back, turned sideways, and said, The princess and the son-in-law are inside, follow me. When the officers and soldiers came up, they carried a lot of things, a total of 3 boxes. Joe Man and the others wanted tofu today, so they took the soaked beans and went down the mountain to grind them into a slurry. At this time, they were cooking tofu in the kitchen with difficulty. Of course, the main force is Bai Shan and Bai Erlang, and Zhou Man and Mingda Yin may not help. Zhou Man's theoretical knowledge is very rich, and he also has a lot of experience as a bystander. When he talks about making tofu, he is very clear, but he can't ask in detail. For example, when cooking tofu, add an appropriate amount of brine and stir. What is the appropriate amount? Zhou Man only remembers that when my sister-in-law made a big bucket of tofu, she added a third of a bowl of brine, but that bucket was theirs, and the bowls were also theirs. The ones I use now, they look different. And to what extent is it stirred? Big or small fire? Bai Shan saw that she was just talking on paper, so he simply took her recipe and figured it out by himself. Anyway, no matter what they made, they would eat it by themselves in the end. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 3435. Zhou Man still had theoretical knowledge, but Mingda and Yin Zhe didn't even have theoretical knowledge, so they could make mistakes just by helping hand something. So when the officers and soldiers arrived, they saw 5 people squatting in the kitchen with ashen faces. The servants in the palace should not be seen, and stepped forward to salute respectfully. I pay my respects to Her Royal Highness, Prince Consort, Princess Liang, Duke Shanghe, and Uncle Anning. The headmaster was already expressionless. Bai Shan didn't know that his face was stained with black ash, so he straightened up and asked with a smile, Why did you people from the palace come here? The servant tried his best to let himself ignore the ashes on Bai Shan's face, lowered his eyes and replied, Your Majesty has written a reply to the Duke, and the Princess House has brought some things. After a pause, he continued, Your Majesty cares about the Princess and all the adults, and specially took part of the melons and fruits that Lingnan paid tribute this year to give the Princess and the adults a taste. After finishing speaking, he waved his hand behind him, and the people behind him lifted the box up. He opened one of the boxes, and there were many boxes stacked inside, and he opened it to show them, This is a tangerine, unique to Lingnan, and it is somewhat stale when sent to the capital. The princess and adults can taste it right now fresh. Mingda took one from the box and said with a smile, It's indeed better than the one sent to the capital, it's harder. She paused, and asked Bai Shan curiously, It's strange, we've been here for a while, and we haven't seen tangerines for sale here. The head of the village hurriedly said, Oh, we don't have such precious things here. After he finished speaking, he realized who he was talking to, and quickly covered his mouth. The servant also gave Li Chang a look. Mingda smiled and said, It doesn't matter, let him talk back. Seeing her friendly, the village chief breathed a sigh of relief, and said in a low voice, We've only heard about this precious thing, and rarely seen it, let alone eating and planting it. When Zhou Man heard it, he immediately dropped the fire stick in his hand and ran over, Let me see. The servant hurriedly delivered the box. Zhou Man picked it up and looked at it and asked Keek excitedly, Do you want to take it? Keek, the encyclopedia needs cultivated plants. Zhou Man asked the waiter, Where is there a species around here? Let's go and learn more. The waiter, there are in Liu's Hu. Zhou Man made up his mind, and said to his old friends, "Let's go to Liuzhu in 2 days." Naturally, Bai Shan and Yin had no objection, and Mingda and Bai Erlang happened to have had enough fun here, so they agreed, "Okay." Waiter. Mingda and the others looked at other things. Many people in the capital sent them things. They were originally entrusted by the people of the princess mansion to deliver them. Who knew that the emperor suddenly took over, and the things were naturally delivered by the servants of the palace and the palace guards. The servant took out 2 special letters from his arms, and handed one to Bai Shan. "This is from His Majesty to the Duke." He handed another letter to Mingda. "This is from the Duke of Xiajun, who sent it back from Angzi." Mingda saw Bai Erlang's name on the envelope, and knew that the second son didn't want her to know, and he didn't even call him father. She glanced at the anxious Bai Erlang, and reached out to take it. Bai Shan opened the letter and read it. He was granted the title of Lord of Shanghe County for his achievements in opening water transport. After presiding over the successful tax reform, the emperor intended to give him the title of Duke of Qin, but Bai Shan insisted on refusing. Because of the tax reform, he was already hated by others. When Yang Heshu was demoted, in addition to the problems in the work he presided over, the main reason was that he proposed tax reform and land reform. In fact, this is the idea of Bai Shan, Zhou Man, Tang He and others together with Yang Heshu. The speed of local land circulation is accelerating, and more farmers are losing their land, and the birth rate is increasing year by year, making it difficult for the land equalization system to continue. Because of the medical system, the mortality rate of children in various places has been greatly reduced, which makes the population grow faster. At present, due to the increase in food production and the sharp drop in food prices, although the per capita land of ordinary people is decreasing, life is slowly improving, so no one notices that something is wrong. In addition, due to the opening of water transport, the world is stable, and business is more active. Many people can live without relying on land, and no one will notice the hidden danger. But Bai Shan is different. Not only does he have a higher IQ, but he also read the miscellaneous books brought out by Zhou Man since he was a child. He sees the danger hidden behind. If the peasants are allowed to lose their land, and the land will be gathered bit by bit in the hands of the rich and powerful, within 100 years, the great Jin dynasty will be in chaos. As the left minister at the time, Yang Heshu naturally saw it too. So they decided to reform after repeated arguments. The first thing to do is to convince the emperor. The emperor refused at first. The changes are too great. Once such changes are made, the world that has not been stable for a few years may become chaotic. He doesn't want to be the king of a chaotic country. However, the emperor liked to run away. Taking advantage of the autumn harvest, Bai Shan and Zhou Man abducted the emperor from Yangzhou to Luozhou. On the way, they saw many people who lost their land due to various reasons. The land has become scarce, and the young people who have no land when they grow up have to compete with their brothers for their father's meager Yanjai land. At that time, Bai Shan asked the emperor, "Your Majesty, population growth is a good thing. Because of the war in the previous dynasty, the people were out of 10. The first emperor made great efforts to govern the people and let the people recuperate for more than 20 years. You have worked so hard for so long, and now we have what we have now: number of households and population. Can you bear to see the resurgence of war?" he said. "It doesn't appear now, but the population is increasing, especially in the Guangzhou area, where the land is small and there are many people. Unless the imperial court forces the people to relocate, or in another 20 years, another batch of newborns have grown up, they can't get land, they can't survive, so they can only be refugees." The emperor frowned. "Business. Shangxi can't accommodate so many people." The emperor pondered, "But your and Yang Changbo's proposal is too risky. I don't care what I do. I have reasons to advance or retreat. But once you and Yang Changbo propose, if you can't proceed, you will surely die. He said, "Not only are you dead, but even your family members may." Bai Shan immediately said, "I know that I and Yang Xiang didn't want to do it overnight, we can do it gradually." The emperor asked, "Which one will come first?" Zhou Man on the side interjected, "Let's start with the appropriate age for marriage." She said, "During the Han Dynasty, the court forcibly lowered the age of marriage for the sake of the population, but this is actually unreasonable. It is said in the Huangdi Niajing. Can you just tell me what age is appropriate?" The emperor interrupted her, fearing that she would not be able to hold back, and would continue to speak at length. Zhou Man stopped the words regretfully. "Why don't you abolish the single tax? Men under the age of 20 and women under the age of 18 are not allowed to get married." See you tomorrow. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 3436. The emperor frowned. "Everyone restricts the highest point, but you limit the lowest point." Zhou Man reminded, "Land, land." The emperor immediately changed his words, "Okay, what else?" "Start reforming from the job field," Bai Shan suggested. "Nowadays, the land is reduced, and official land and manpower are sometimes encroached on. How about cancelling the job field and returning the land to the people?" The emperor frowned slightly. "I'm afraid that all the officials in the court will not agree." Bai Shan said, "As long as the salary is sufficient, they will agree." He said, "There are very few people in the court who manage their own jobs like us, and most of them are managed by the household department. After the annual autumn tax, they receive a share from the household department. In fact, it is not much different from receiving a salary. The real difference is the locality, and the occupation of official land mostly occurs in the locality because the local job fields are generally managed by the officials themselves. Few people are handed over to the local households. This is a habit, a self-evident rule." However, Bai Shan thought that such a remuneration method was too complicated. It is better to directly set the income of officials, and the salary of each rank should be paid by the Ministry of Households. The emperor thought about it. In this way, how much is the quota? The official land belongs to the people again. Where did the household department get the extra money and food? This is not a matter of 1 or 2 years, but once it starts, it will be permanent and will be consumed every month. Can the national treasury and local finance support it? Bai Shan immediately said, "So after the job reform, there will be the tax reform, and the local governments will keep this financial reform. As for how much to pay, take the average of the current income of officials of all ranks, and add 2% to it. You get more than you lose, and everyone is willing to, just as a public salary to support the honesty." Seeing that he was speaking clearly and logically, the emperor asked, "Have you calculated it?" Bai Shan smiled slightly, and said confidently, "Naturally, Chen and Yang et al. Have calculated repeatedly for 2 years and thought of various situations." He bewitched the emperor and said, "I know your majesty's worries. The former dynasty fell because of the cruelty of the last emperor, excessive expropriation and excessive extravagance. Second, he was ungrateful." The emperor glanced at Bai Shan and gave him a meaningful look. Both of them studied under Mr. Zhuang. Since Zhuang Sun entered the Chongquen Museum, even if he became the emperor, he would often ask Zhuang Sun to take classes. Sometimes just listening to him talk about the current government would be rewarding. Although Zhuang Sun seldom expresses his opinions on the current government affairs, whenever he asks, the other party starts by talking about history and ends by discussing history. Similar things happen all the time in history. For example, their attitude towards aristocratic families. The so-called lack of gratitude of the last emperor of the former dynasty, in detail, means that the last emperor of the former dynasty was unwilling to be constrained by the powerful family, So he vigorously promoted the imperial examination, which directly overturned the rice bowl of the Jupin Zhongzheng system. He led a group of people and aristocratic families to fight against Meimang directly. In addition to the domestic and foreign difficulties at the time, he caused public resentment to build the Grand Canal and fight Goguryeo, so everyone took advantage of the situation. Although it was their Li family who took the seat, they were similar in their understanding of the aristocratic family. Moreover, the Li family's feelings are even deeper. They must not fall into the same pit because of the lessons learned from the previous dynasty. It is impossible to obey the powerful families. The best way is to weaken their influence in the court and in the world. If they are weakened, then there will be replacements. Poor families and even common people are good influences. However, unlike the last emperor of the previous dynasty, what he wanted to do in 3 years, the first emperor spent 20 years paving the way for him, and he may not be able to complete it while he is alive, but it doesn't matter, he still has a son. Before his death, his father repeatedly told him to distinguish between priorities and urgency. Although some things are important, they must be done slowly. To be a man, you must be patient. To be an emperor, you must not only be patient, but also be patient. Only by enduring what ordinary people cannot bear can one become a good emperor. The emperor pondered for a moment, skipped all kinds of technical questions, and asked instead, "Nowadays, one of you is the prime minister, the other is the minister's order, and the other is the administrative order. You can be said to be the first in the court. Wait, are you really willing to give up?" He looked at Zhou Man, and said meaningfully, "I'm afraid that no one can match Zhou Qing's income in the middle school. Those occupations under your name, especially the construction of Pu village, cost a lot of money, right? Every year the harvest of your field of work is the envy of all officials." Zhou Man responded, "As long as it is for the good of the Jin dynasty and His Majesty, what I lose is only a temporary benefit. After the minister, the descendants and grandchildren are all Jin people, and they are His Majesty's subjects. They will enjoy all kinds of benefits after today. In this way, the minister is not considered a loss." The emperor raised his eyebrows, laughed loudly, and slapped his thigh. "Okay. If everyone could be like Qing, why would the world be uneven?" Zhou Man's words gave the emperor the confidence to persuade all the officials. He got up and turned around twice, and finally looked back at Bai Shan with piercing eyes, and asked, "How do you want to change taxes? It's as whimsical as it is in the booklet. You don't need to talk about the proposal, you just talk about your bottom line, the initial idea, and don't have to think about bargaining with me." The emperor hates mother-in-law and mother-in-law the most. Bai Shan cheered up, and said, "It is indeed difficult to complete the things in the booklet. Even if it is completed, I am afraid that there will be chaos, so the ministers have repeatedly deliberated, and the ministers first propose to collect the ding tax and the land tax together, and wait when the time is ripe, the officials and gentry will be taxed. This is a very difficult task, not only because it harms the interests of the rich and powerful at this time, but also because not everyone agrees that Bai Shanyang and Shu's move will benefit Dajin and the world. The former objection is difficult to deal with, and the latter objection is even more difficult. Recognition is an extremely difficult thing to change. Fortunately, there are quite a few ministers in the court who know the same as Bai Shanyang Heshu, and they don't want to change everything as soon as they come up, but plan it gradually, as Bai Shan said. Yang Heshu presided over the reform of the job field, and then proposed the tax reform, and then he made a mistake and was released. After Bai Shan took over, he settled down for 2 years, and then he began to put forward some small opinions, and revised some a year. After finally laying the foundation, he began to reform taxes. Not only the land tax and small tax, but also the commercial tax. The scope of the reform is very wide, but the pace has been narrowed. Instead of taking a long step, we have taken a cautious step forward. But even at this step, they have walked for 10 years. Bai Shan waited until the matter was completed and the Jin dynasty became more stable and stronger, then he thought of retreating, and the talents of his successors were not inferior to him, and there were many people who had the same understanding and ambitions as him. I got a method of writing fantasies, which is to use this kind of protagonist to travel around, string together the fantasies that everyone needs, and when they need it, it is enough to write a little bit of their own description. Not only can you always see the protagonists, but you can write freely. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 3437. Although after the matter was completed, Bai Shan was unrivaled in the court and his prestige increased day by day, but he also offended many people. In addition, he and the emperor had often quarreled over the years. The monarch and his ministers had been face to face for a long time, and they couldn't help but hate each other, so he sick and resigned. However, with this resignation, the relationship between the monarch and his ministers has improved again, and it seems that they have returned to the honeymoon period when the emperor first took the throne. Not only Bai Shan likes to write letters to the emperor to talk about his experiences abroad, but the emperor also likes to write to him to discuss the government affairs, and occasionally talk about which minister in the court made him angry again, and the children under him are disobedient one by one, get him into trouble all day long, or be useless and so on. The emperor, like the first emperor, liked to give good things to someone when he loved someone, and his behavior was more obvious and intense, so in the letter, the emperor once again mentioned that he wanted to make him Duke of Qin. After careful calculation, the few prime ministers in this dynasty, as long as they didn't make big mistakes, even if they didn't make great achievements in office, they would be knighted when they retired from office. It was Ji Xiang during the late emperor's time. Although he slipped his hands like a loach and was half forced to leave the court, the late emperor still gave him enough dignity when he left. Not only did he retain him twice, but he also gave him a title. Although it cannot be inherited, as long as he is alive, the Ji family will have the glory of meritorious service. And Zhou Man has made a lot of achievements over the years, but she didn't give her another title because the emperor gave her enough food towns one after another, and the whole Liang County became her food town, and the title became heritable. Bai Jingxin was conferred the title of county lord based on her mother's meritorious deeds. If there is no accident, she can choose a child to inherit her title in the future, either as princess lord or duke of the county, and then she will be downgraded to the rank of lord. This was the emperor's greatest reward for her. Becoming an official, in addition to realizing ideals and honoring ancestors, one of the biggest functions is to seal his wife and son. But if Bai Shan's wife doesn't use his merits to confer titles, she can only be her son. That's why the emperor is so keen on giving him a title. How about being a duke of the state so that it can be passed on to his sons? However, Bai Shan felt that he had been hated too much these past few years, so he didn't want it anymore, so he ran away with the title of Duke of a county. Bai Shan folded the letter, ignoring the emperor's old story, and went to look at the things sent by the servant. The most of them are the things brought by Zhou Jiachuo Princess Mansion. Zhou Man kept taking things out of the box, full of surprises. This is the meat sauce made by my sister-in-law, and there are even pickles. This is good, I will cut the porridge and eat it tomorrow. Zhou Man hugged all kinds of jars in the box and burst into tears. How does sister-in-law know that I can't eat well or sleep well outside? Bai Shan turned to look at her. Are you sleeping well? It's just a description. Bai Shan stretched out his hand and pinched the flesh on her face. You haven't eaten well, have you? Zhou Man patted his hand off. What do you know, this is a feeling of eating, happiness or unhappiness, you can't see it just by looking at the flesh on your face. Bai Shan held back a smile and asked, then what are you looking at? Look at my mood, I am very happy when I eat, which means that the food is delicious, and I am generally happy when I eat, which means that the food is very ordinary. Zhou Man said, most of the time when I eat here, I am in a bad mood. Generally, when eating something made by my sister-in-law, I feel very good. Everyone took out their things. Bai Shan got Yang Hesh's letter, but it was for Zhou Man, and he handed it to her. Zhou Man took it apart, and took a look. Yang Heshu mainly mentioned to her about the reform of the medical department this year, and suggested that when she was in Lingnan, she could take a look at the local planting conditions and see if she could arrange a medicinal garden for planting medicinal materials in Lingnan. If it is suitable, the Imperial Medical Department will send people to investigate and arrange it later. Zhou Man folded the letter. Don't mention it, Lingnan is quite suitable for growing medicinal materials. Bai Shan turned his head and said, we can go to a few more places to have a look later anyway, it was a incidental thing. Respond to Zhou Man. Yin Or's father and several older sisters also brought him things, but they were all food and clothing. He handed it to Chang Xiao, and glanced at the officers and soldiers who came up the mountain together. Why don't you let them come down to eat and try our tofu? Because the rooms in the mountains are limited, it is impossible to stay, but it is still possible to stay. The servants and guards only felt honored, and they were stunned when they saw that Bai Shan and the others were cooking by themselves and cooking with a few servants. Then I had a delicious tofu feast. After returning, the emperor asked them curiously, are they still cooking? The waiter emphasized, I have cooked several dishes, among which the tofu was ground and cooked by them. The emperor smiled and asked, how does it taste? The servant smiled awkwardly, took a sneak peek at the emperor, and after a moment of deliberation, decided to tell the truth. Lord Bai and Lord Zhou are better served as servants of His Majesty's humorous. The kitchen work is not suitable for them. The emperor laughed heartily. Once the people who came to deliver things to them left, people in the villages and towns knew that the people living on the mountain were big shots, and people in the county and the state capital naturally knew it too. So many people poured into the small town, cattle and horses neighing, all of them came to visit Bai Shan and the others. Their main targets are Bai Shan and Zhou Man. If they can get 1 or 2 pointers or comments from them, their trip will be worthwhile, and if they can get recommendations, it will be even more worthwhile. Too bad they were still late. Bai Shan seemed to have foreseen their arrival, and started to pack up after the officers and soldiers left, and left the mountain the day before their arrival. Only Zhou Man sent the village chief a medicinal soup recipe for dampness removal and a prescription for epidemic prevention, hoping that he could spread the word and benefit the villagers in the village and town. Once there is fog in this place, people will easily get sick. It is impossible to change the environment. We can only take more precautions from the human body. Although it cannot be eradicated, it can strengthen 1 or 2 and reduce the number of external evils entering the body. There are still a lot of things left in the house, which they can't take away, and they don't want to take them away, leaving them for the people behind to use. People who came to visit climbed up the mountain and saw people go to the empty houses. Some people turned around and went down the mountain after being a step late, and some stayed where they saw the beautiful scenery here, and couldn't help but stop and stay. Those who decided to stay chose a house at random to live in. The tables, chairs, benches, and beds were all complete, and they only needed to be covered with bedding. Watching the sunrise and sunset every day is really interesting. The town was bustling because of the arrival of these people, and the villagers made a lot of money because of it. Later, most of them left, a small number of people stayed and left, and some people came after a while. They came again not to visit Bai Shan and Zhou Man, but to take a look at the places where they lived and the beautiful scenery they had seen, which kept the bustle of the village going. Life is much easier for tourists. See you tomorrow. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 3438. The head of the village was very happy, and generously passed on the 2 prescriptions left by Zhou Man. Hearing that this prescription was specially created by Zhou Man for the people in Lingnan, the scholars and doctors who came here were very moved and helped to spread it. So when Zhou Man didn't know Her reputation went up a lot. Zhou Man and the others went directly to Liu's. Liu's is much more prosperous than the small town they lived in before, and there are many shops on the street. As soon as they entered the city gate, they faced the bustling streets. After living in a secluded mountain for a long time, suddenly entering a bustling city, not to mention, the feeling is quite good. A bullock cart was coming from the opposite side, and Zhou Man found that there were too many carriages and horses on their side, occupying half of the street, so he kicked the horse's stomach, and nimbly passed the carriage in front, and walked around to make way. This made the people on the bullock cart look up at Zhou Man in surprise, and Zhou Man also turned his head slightly to look at it. The two immediately met their eyes, and when they turned around, one of them asked in unproficient Mandarin, "Buy me, fruit." One also asked in an unproficient dialect, "Do you sell the fruit in your basket?" Both of them smiled when they asked. The ox cart stopped, Zhou Man also stopped the horse, threw the reins to Bai Shan, and ran to take a look at the fruits in the basket. Zhou Man confirmed that he had never eaten the ugly orange, so he happily said to him, "Let's find a spacious place to talk." The other party was surprised, "Did you buy too much?" Zhou Man said, "Another business." The other party followed her in a daze to find a spacious place, and saw that there were still people getting off from the two carriages, plus the people on horseback, and they surrounded his ox cart with a huff. He couldn't help swallowing, and said a little nervously, My father is the patriarch, are you foreigners?" Zhou Man nodded, "Yes, we are from the capital, did you see that?" Seeing that he was still kind, the other party breathed a sigh of relief. Zhou Man reached for the oranges in the basket and asked, "This orange is so ugly, what's it called?" "It's called orange," he said, "although it looks ugly, it's delicious and sweet." He said generously, "I'll give you a taste, it doesn't cost money if it's not sweet." Zhou Man peeled one and tasted a piece, his eyes were slightly bright, and he distributed it to Bai Shan and the others. "It's not worse than tangerine." "It really is." Mingda looked at the peel of the fruit in Zhou Man's hand, wondering, the skin is thicker, so it should be easier to transport than the mandarin orange. Since it is not inferior to the mandarin orange, why is there no tribute? Zhou Man looked at the skin in his hand, because it's too ugly. The young fruit seller didn't quite understand what they said, and urged, "Do you want to buy it?" "No, how many caddies do you want?" Bai Shan couldn't help laughing, and asked softly, "What's your name?" Seeing that he was a little wary and didn't answer, he explained in a softer voice, "We are from other places, and we have never seen such an orange tree in our place, so we want to gain some insight." He said, "We want to pick the fruit ourselves." Bai Shan took out a dime from the purse and gave it to him. The young man glanced at it, shook his head and didn't answer. "My mother said, we only want money, not silver. The silver is likely to be fake." Bai Shan raised his eyebrows, and poured out all the copper coins in the money bag to him, not many, and strung them into a small string, with about 40 coins. But in the eyes of the young man, this is already a lot, and it can buy his small half-basket of oranges. For the sake of money, the young man said, "My name is Ashan, my family is in Niuwei village, a bit far from the city, you have to walk a long way to pick the fruit." He couldn't understand their behavior, so he urged, "Don't go, Nyo, there are ready-made ones, and they are all good. If you give more money, I will give you a little more." Bai Shan smiled and asked, "Is it far away?" "Far away, I want to stay in the wild for one night," he said, pointing to the sun in the sky, "so I have to leave the city quickly, and then I can go to a mountain temple to live at night, and then go home the next day." Bai Shan then said, "Okay, you can go back first, we bought these fruits too, in a few days we will go to Niuwei village to find you to pick the fruits." Zhou Man asked, "Aside from these ugly oranges, what other fruits do you have there?" Ah Shan said, "There are still good-looking oranges, pears, plums, and longan, but these three are gone. There are only good-looking oranges and ugly oranges. Joe man, are there no tangerines? Ah Shan glanced at her and shook his head. No, that thing doesn't belong to us. He paused, and for the sake of their generosity, he still reminded, that one is for noble people, it is not sold outside, so don't look for it. Joe man nodded, expressing his understanding. They agreed with Ah Shan that they would go to Niawei village, and the group carried the ugly oranges they had just bought to find a place to live. Some servants went to the city ahead of time, and arrangements have been made for them. The post station is small, so the small ones found an inn in the city, and booked their second and third floors. The inn is fairly clean, and there are many restaurants nearby. It looks bustling and lively, but it is on the corner of the street, so it is quiet. It is also because it is on the corner of the street, so the servants can directly book the entire inn. Other inns have guests, so it is not easy to book. The servant said, I have inquired with the store owner that since the opening of the water transport, the time from south to north has been shortened, so many people have come to Lingnan to buy goods. He said, the medicinal materials, tea and fruits here are very popular in the north, so many merchants come here during the season. Joe man was curious, is there not much fruit at this time? The innkeeper who came to entertain them immediately asked with a smile, isn't your guest a merchant who came to buy goods? Joe man smiled and said, we are here to play. Of course, if we encounter rare goods, we will sell some. She saw that he spoke official Chinese well, and he didn't have a local accent, but had some Lu dialect, so she asked, is the shopkeeper from Lu? The shopkeeper's eyes lit up slightly, and he hurriedly said, exactly, your honored guest has been to Ludi. Joe man laughed and said, I used to live in Qingzhou for a few years. That's an old friend, please sit down quickly, he said with a smile, there are not many fresh fruits at the moment, only some oranges and tangerines, and the rest are all dried fruits, but Lingnan is mountainous. There are a lot of medicinal materials in the mountains, and many vendors are here for this. Joe man was thoughtful, there are indeed a lot of medicinal materials from Lingnan in the past few years, and even 2 local medicinal materials dealers were selected into the Pharmacy Supply Bureau of the Imperial Medical Administration. The shopkeeper looked at Joe man in surprise, nodded and smiled and said, exactly, that happened a year before last. When those 2 were selected, the whole Liaozhou was full of excitement. They celebrated in the city for 3 days, and the water table was set up for 5 days. Joe man, so grand, their drug prices are not very high, obviously within the normal range. Making it so grand made her feel like she was given the wrong price. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 3439. The shopkeeper smiled and said, isn't it grand? A few years ago, Liaozhou was still a remote village with impassable roads, and no matter how many good things there were, they couldn't get out. After Governor Lu arrived, it took a lot of money to educate the people, build bridges and pave roads. It took so much effort to push out the 2 medicinal materials merchants, and the medicinal materials from our Liaozhou entered the title of the Imperial Medical Office, which attracted so many merchants. I remembered when you said that, Joe man blinked, at that time, the medicinal materials were directly delivered to me, and the person who delivered the medicinal materials. Joe man looked at Bai Shan. Bai Shan smiled and said, the governor of Liaozhou is Lu Xiaofo. Yin raised his eyebrows, while Bai Erlang said yeah, why is it him? The shopkeeper looked at them in surprise, and asked tentatively, how many of you know Governor Lu? I know you, a faint voice sounded at the door. Everyone turned around and saw an elegant man standing at the door with his hands behind his back. Bai Shan smiled, Huanyan, you know that we don't want to trouble you, you will visit us when we settle down, otherwise, when the soldiers in your governor's mansion return home, do I have an order not to reveal our whereabouts? Lu Xiaofo's word Guanyin was given to him by the teacher of Qiaozijian when he reached the crown. Because of this word, everyone was happy for a long time. Only then did Lu Xiaofo smile, and he went forward to salute Mingda. I will see the princess. Mingda, no courtesy. Lu Xiaofo looked at Bai Shan and Zhou Man, raised his hand and was about to salute, but was supported by Bai Shan. Okay, there is no need to be so polite between classmates, it will be dark when we finish saluting. Lu Xiaofo gave up, and smiled with him. How does it feel to travel along the way? It's not bad, the law and order is very good, the people live and work in peace and contentment, and there are many merchants in the city. You have contributed a lot. Lu Xiaofo smiled and said, thank you very much. If you hadn't given me money and food to build roads and dredge rivers, I would have been hard-pressed to do this. Bai Shan said seriously, you can definitely do it, but it's just a matter of time. He said, the people under your rule want to live well, and you are dedicated to them, and the government and the people are of one mind. Why can't you achieve it? Lu Xiaofo was deeply moved by his affirmation, and looked at him with tears in his eyes. Yin was probably not in the court, so he didn't know the whereabouts of the Qiaozijian students, so he asked curiously, where does Peng's hero work now? Bai Shandao, he is in Chuzhu, Huainan, but I heard that he will return to Beijing this summer to report on his duties. I don't know if he will go to Huainan Road or stay in Beijing. Lu Xiaofo still had contact with the other party, and said, stayed in Beijing, I heard that he joined the official department. The shopkeeper came back to his senses at this moment. He didn't expect a princess to live in his store, and listening to the sound, this fair-faced and elegant man seemed to be in a high position, and he was able to help Governor Lu get the appropriation. He sneaked a glance at a few people, and seeing that they were having a good chat, he trotted to the back kitchen. The classmates haven't seen each other for many years, even though they haven't been classmates for a long time in the Imperial College, they have kept in touch with each other during the few years of studying in the capital, so their relationship is not bad. Seeing the ugly orange that Zhou Man took out, he couldn't help but smile. When I came to my place, I asked you to invite me to eat the local products here. Bai Shan took the opportunity to smile and said, I was just about to tell you that we want to go and have a look at tangerines. If possible, we can dig 2 tangerines and plant them ourselves. It's not difficult, Lu Xiaofo said, it's just where are you planting it? It can't be planted in the capital, let alone the capital, and it's very difficult to plant it further north. Although it can survive, it will bear fruit. But the taste is totally different. He obviously tried it. Out of this area of water and soil, the further north you go, the more sour the tangerines you grow, and many melons and fruits taste better only when they are grown in this area. It is also because of this that after the road is connected, so many merchants can be attracted here. Bai Shan nodded, but still insisted, let's try. Lu Xiaofo said quickly, okay, I'll arrange the things at hand and take you to have a look in 2 days. The tangerines here are also grown by the fruit growers, but every year they buy them with the fruit growers, and after sorting them out, they either pay tribute, give gifts, or sell them. Production is not very high. Lu Xiaofo said, there are still some fruits hanging on the tree now, you can try the fresh taste. It was given to us 2 days ago. Didn't it take 2 days to send it over? Lu Xiaofo said, it's different from the one just picked from the tree. Having said that, not only Bai Shan and Zhou Man, but also Yin or the 3 of them are eager to try. Lu Xiaofo asked, shall I hold a banquet in the mansion tomorrow to welcome you? Bai Shan hurriedly refused, it's all right to see my siblings and your children, there is no need to invite other people. Lu Xiaofo felt a little regretful, but he had already expected it in his heart. After all, they didn't even find him when they went to the city. let alone meet other unfamiliar people. Okay, you guys rest first. Lu Xiaofo knew that they had just arrived and was about to get up to say goodbye when the shopkeeper ran over excitedly, bowed and said, "Inspector, distinguished guests, the little one has already made the kitchen the best restaurant for the shop. I even killed 2 chickens and stewed the special dish. This time it will be ready soon. Distinguished guests, let's start serving it now, or..." Joe Man blinked, "We haven't ordered yet." The shopkeeper said generously, "This meal is for the distinguished guests. The princess and all the adults are able to settle in this small shop. It is the blessing of the small shop. Just for this blessing, it is worth the small meal." Upon hearing this, several people readily accepted it. The shopkeeper ordered the kitchen to cook all the special dishes in their shop, including Shandong dishes, but more local dishes. For example, chicken, they follow the way the locals eat it, first stewing the whole chicken and then cutting it, and eating it with dipping sauce. It is tender and smooth. Lu Xiaofo simply stayed and had a light meal with them, and it was already dark when he got home. Mrs. Lu had been waiting for him with warm dishes, and when she saw him coming back alone, she hurriedly stepped forward and asked, "Why, didn't you invite anyone?" Lu Xiaofo smiled with her, "Don't worry, I'll clean them up at home tomorrow and call the children." Mrs. Lu breathed a sigh of relief and smiled. Lu Xiaofo comforted her, "Don't be nervous, they are very kind people." Madame Lu smiled. Lu Xiaofo thought for a while and then said, "It goes without saying that the princess is honorable, but that boy by ahem, I mean that the white son-in-law is not a high-flying person, and he hasn't changed in so many years. Among them, he and Mr. Zhou are the most easy to get along with." Mrs. Lu asked curiously, "What about Master Bai and Mr. Yin?" "Both of them. Bai Shan is kind on the outside and cold in heart to strangers, Yin or the opposite, he is cold on the face and kind in heart, but both of them are polite on the surface," Lu Xiaofo said with a smile. "What's more about us, it's not a stranger either, so you don't have to worry. Classmates and subjects are all contacts in the court." Lu Xiaofo and Bai Shan both entered the Imperial Academy in the same year. Not only did they have classmates, but they also lost their parents when they were young. After he became an official in the imperial court, he often kept in touch with him. When he was sent to Liuzhu, a remote place in the countryside, the first person he sought was Bai Shan. Later, with the help of Bai Shan and Zhou Man, they pushed out the medicine merchants here, and gained a reputation for several medicines, which made Liuzhu's business flourish. Mrs. Lu nodded, expressing her understanding. "See you tomorrow." Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 3440. When An Yin entered the Imperial College, Lu Xiaofo and Bai Shan's situation was the most similar. Both of them lost their parents when they were young, and they had the opportunity to be admitted to the Imperial College because of their father's grace. The two are similar in age, and both have been admitted to Kuozixu, so they are equally attracting attention, and they are also the group of people who became friends the fastest in the class. But at the time, no one expected that in the end, the closest to Bai Shan in the class, and the one with the best relationship was actually Yin He. You know, the relationship between Bai Shan and Yin Or was not good at first, and there were disputes in the supervisor for this reason. Well, now that I understand Yin Or's character, looking back, Yin Or didn't say a single word in that dispute from the beginning to the end. This caused a commotion. But on that block, Bai Shan and Yin Ru slowly came together. When Lu Xiaofo and others realized it, Yin might have become Bai Shan's friend, going in and out together. Then, Bai Shan sued the imperial court in the palace, uncovering the Yizhu King's rebellion case in one fell swoop, and became famous all over the world. Then their paths began to diverge. Bai Shan was imprisoned, the game between the court and the court, the Yizhu King was killed in rebellion after fleeing abroad, Bai Shan was released from prison, and when they met again, one of them was still a student of the Imperial College, and the other was a well-known loyal and filial son. Then Bai Shan entered the Chongguan Museum, and Zhou Man entered the Imperial Hospital, and the differences between them became even more different. Jealousy is not guaranteed, but envy is certain. But when Bai Shan walked the road wider and wider, to the point where he couldn't measure it, the road got farther and farther, so far that he couldn't see the end with his eyes. Lu Xiaofo knew that there was a difference between them, not only in the Kongwengan. An encounter. Even if Bai Shan is not appreciated by the prince, he will have such achievements in the future, it's just a matter of time. A person's ability and knowledge may be determined from the beginning. Bai Shan is the most shining in their class, and also the most mentioned by the students. Looking at the students since the establishment of the Quazijian school in this dynasty, only the senior brother Yang Hesha can compare with him. And these two people have achieved the position of prime minister. Among the classmates at the same level, Lu Xiaofo was the most eye-catching. After all, he became the governor at a young age. If you can't compare with Bai Shan, who can compare with Bai Shan? A year later, the Hanlin Academy went directly to Zhongshu province. Even if it was downgraded and went to Qingzhou as a county magistrate, it was for the purpose of accumulating experience. Lu Xiaofo climbed up step by step honestly. In fact, this speed is already considered fast. He served as a local county magistrate for 5 years. After he had achieved political achievements, he was promoted to a senior official, and then he was transferred to Liuzhu as the governor. Naturally, the achievements in the past have not been too turbulent, and the wind has always been smooth. Speaking of which, this time he went to Liuzhu to be the governor, and the achievements he made are probably the most remarkable since he became an official. Seeing that this once barren and closed place was built little by little because of him, the traffic was opened, the people were courteous and obedient, and life gradually improved, he felt a sense of accomplishment. It was also because of this that after the 3-year term expired, Liuzhu had begun to see results, and the Ministry of Officials assigned him a top rank, and he refused when he wanted to transfer him to Zhongzhou as the governor. Lu Xiaofo finally understood why Bai Shan had stayed in a small county under Qingzhou for 5 years. In fact, the fruit tree raised by himself had just bloomed and had not had time to see its fruit, so how could he be willing to leave? He wants to stay, continue to fertilize and water it, watch it grow fruit, and watch it grow up bit by bit. When the fruit is ripe, he can confirm that this fruit tree will grow vigorously in the future, so that he can rest assured. Leave. So he was very cautious about entertaining Bai Shan and Zhou Man. He didn't care about the princess consort. Bai Shan and Zhou Man were the key. No, it should be said that Zhou Man was the key. According to his unreliable sources of information, Zhou Man is likely to help the Imperial Medical Bureau find a suitable place for medicinal planting. With the opening of medical offices in various places, Dajin's medical business is developing vigorously and rapidly. The high yield of grain has enabled many people to have enough to eat, and the price of grain has dropped, so more people can afford to see a disease. In addition, the medical department has basic medical insurance for the people of Dajin, and the 2 items of epidemic prevention and smallpox vaccination in the spring and winter of each year can consume a lot of medicinal materials. Therefore, in recent years, the Imperial Medical Administration has cooperated with many pharmacies and clinics, that is, instructing farmers to grow medicines in various places, and the drug dealers buy them, process them, and then sell them to the Imperial Medical Administration and local medical offices. Of course, the Thai Medical Department also directly purchases from Yaonan, but not many, so such opportunities are particularly valuable. If this area of Liuzhu can be approved by Zhou Man, a medicine nursery directly supplied to the Imperial Medical Office will be established here. With this thought in mind, Lu Xiaofo did what he liked, not only invited 3 chefs in Liuzhu city to cook them a sumptuous banquet, but also skipped work the next day to take them to see mandarin oranges. Knowing that Zhou Man likes flowers and plants that he has never seen before, He also found many flowers and plants that he thought were rare and had never seen before to show her. I have heard that you have arrived in Lingnan, and you didn't come to Liuzhu. Yours, these are some rare plants I have seen here, and I have never seen them before. Zhou Man looked regretful. Unfortunately, I have seen them all, they were all included. Lu Xiaofo was not disappointed either. He waved his hand and said, it's okay, we don't have many other things in Liuzhu. The flowers and trees are extremely prosperous, and the plants here are unbeatable all year round. You see, it's winter now, and it's still lush and lush when you look up. Isn't summer in Chang'an about the same? From the perspective of the prosperity of flowers and trees, it really is. Zhou Man nodded. The environment here is different from that in the north. It's hot and humid. Some vegetation can't grow in the north, but it grows well here. Anyway, you don't rush to leave, you can take your time, Lu Xiaofo calmly recommended them here. Land and climate, although there are many hills here, they are not very high. Oh, that mountain is not counted. Except for the two mountains that look relatively high, the other mountains are very short. The soil in the mountains is thick and very thick. It is suitable for growing some flowers and trees. Zhou Man nodded, indeed. Bai Shan turned his head to look at Lu Xiaofo, smiled and said nothing. Zhou Man's attention is still on Tangerine. The tangerine tree is not very tall, and she can pick the fruit with her hands. Zhou Man stared at one of the yellow-orange oranges and asked, can we pick it? Lu Xiaofo was very generous. He waved his hand and said, pick it up as you like. Zhou Man and the others knew that this fruit was precious, and besides picking the best ones for tribute, the rest could be sold elsewhere. This fruit is the most delicious, only grown in the Liuzhu area, and the rarest is the most expensive. So Zhou Man only picked one that she thought was the tastiest, tasted it, it was really delicious, it had a lot of water, and the honey was slightly sour, which magnified the sweetness of the honey. Zhou Man was very satisfied and asked, do you have any seedlings? Give me two. Lu Xiaofo smiled and said, it's already prepared for you.